Hey guys, long time lurker, first time poster. Thought I'd tell you a story about one of the more creepy encounters I've had so far. At the time, I was a few months into my undergrad in Austin, Texas, and had just become comfortable enough with myself to come out of the closet. At the time, there are no dating apps available, so to find dates, I used Craigslist. Big mistake. I started chatting with a guy off Craigslist, and we hit it off and decided to set up a time and place for a date to meet in person. His ad said that he was 27 and I was 18 at the time. At first, he was very insistent on meeting at his place, which I later found out was just a trailer, and it kind of made me suspicious, but in his pictures he was very good looking, had a nice smile, etc., so I decided to let it go. Eventually, we agreed to get coffee before going back to his place. So the day arrived and I went to go get coffee, and I was pretty excited. I showed my roommate a picture of Craig and talked about how I was looking forward to meeting him. I showed up to the coffee shop and he was already there. He actually did look like his pictures, so that was a good start. We got coffee and ended up chatting for several hours before he asked me if I wanted to go back to his place. Luckily, my roommate called to check up on me and also called because he was stranded because his car broke down. So I told Craig I would take my friend home before heading back over to his place. Well, by the time I picked up my friend, Craig was no longer interested in his phone, text, or anything. When he finally answered, he accused me of making up an excuse so I wouldn't have to go back to his place with him, and basically was very angry and annoyed, despite our great conversation earlier. I was a bit bummed, but basically didn't think of him until years later when my old roommate sent me a link to this news article about Craig. Apparently, he had been running a sex trafficking ring using underage boys that he would lure through his good looks and promises. I can only imagine what would have happened to me if I had gone back to his trailer with him that day. I know this isn't as creepy as other stories, but it definitely gave me chills when I read the article. So a bit of a backstory. I'm an 18-year-old female from the UK. This happened in February 2019, so I was 16 at the time. I got set up on a semi-blind date by a mutual friend, and this guy we'll call Cameron. He was 19. Cameron seemed like your average guy, maybe a little into video games and anime and stuff, but overall nothing my friend told me about him seemed off in any way. Our mutual friend gave us each other's numbers, and we texted for a night and decided to meet up at a Starbucks the next day since we were both free. I never liked meeting new people this soon, but I figured since Cameron knew my friend, it couldn't possibly go wrong. How mistaken I was. I arrived slightly early, ordered my coffee, since I never like guys to feel like they have to buy it for me. I parked my seat facing away from the door and pulled out a book. I may be there for 15 minutes chilling out, and I get a text saying, "I'm here." So I'm like, great, I'm at this table. I feel a presence over my shoulder, and I turn my head slightly in acknowledgement. He must be here. Before I could even get a chance to squeak out a hello, his lips latch onto my neck and he starts sucking on my neck. Now I don't like people touching my neck at the best of times. I'm very ticklish, and I get super uncomfortable by people even touching my neck. The few times I've gotten massages or hair treatments, I would hold in my discomfort, and he latches onto my neck like a leech. And this man smells horrendous, kind of like dust personified. I freak out and elbow him in the chest to get him the hell off me, and looks at me with this weird expression on his face and laughs in deadpan. It's really creepy and I start to become alarmed. I ask him what the hell that was, and he just says, "I thought it was cute." Cute in what world? I try to have a conversation. I'm like, first impressions don't mean anything. Let's try to give him a chance. But he's just creepily staring at my chest. He says, "Wow, I didn't know Asians could have boobs like those. I better not let you go." Direct quote, I can't make this shit up. I'm distinctly uncomfortable, but I don't just want to run away. He's giving me really weird vibes. So I go into the ladies' bathroom and wait for someone else to come in. A lady comes in and I ask her to help me get out undetected. I don't want this man following me home or some shit. She of course agrees and lends me her hat and scarf, and we come out of the bathroom together. She manages to help me sneak out the back door of Starbucks without him noticing me. He calls and asks my friend where I went, but I told my friend never to mention me again. I was too terrified. I know I probably didn't behave well. I should have just told him I was leaving, but honestly I was just scared. Dear guy who decided it was appropriate to suck on my neck before we had even said hello, let's not meet again. Edit. A few people are asking me about the friend. The friend told me off for leaving without Cameron, saying I was horrible and should have given him a chance, so I unfriended him too. Can't have people like that in your life. This is the first time I've ever posted on Let's Not Meet. I keep reading all these dating horror stories, and it being Valentine's Day and all, it had me recall a nearly forgotten first date with a guy my friend Mark had fixed me up with. I had known the guy a little bit because he worked with my friend at a local music store. He seemed pretty cool and was actually pretty good looking. The first time we had met was at an ICP concert that we all had attended. The guy, who we'll call Mike, was pretty normal on the surface, and through Mark got my number and called me. We went out on a date, and as the night drew on, he asked me if I minded if we went to go hang out at a local park and chat, because we had been at a super busy loud bar that had a band playing. I was 19 and highly stupid back then, so I agreed to it. It was in the summer and wasn't yet dark, so I wasn't thinking it seemed weird. As we were just chatting, he leans in and kisses me, and I look around, realizing it had gotten really dark. I'm in heaven because at this point, he hasn't given me any reason to think he's a creeper. We had had a great time that night. He was charming and funny, and we had a ton in common. Then after our first kiss, he gets a creepy grin. He looks out the window of his car and says to me, "I'm taking you into those woods, and we're gonna have a really good time." I kinda laugh a bit nervously, because at that time, I hadn't yet lost my virginity. I tell him I would rather just stay in the car. He gets weird and angry, and it's like he's two different people. "Why can't we go in the woods? I promise I won't rape or kill you." By then, he's trying to laugh it off, but I had gotten incredibly creeped out. I tried to play it off like I'm not ready to run away. I should have been more creeped out than I was, but I was so naive. I'm creeped out now, writing this. He looks at me again and leans back in his seat and begins to start fake whining. "Oh, come on, let me just take you to the woods. It'll be fun." I'm having none of this and start getting mad, and I tell him I'm ready to go home. I finally talk him into just taking me home. He was oddly quiet for the rest of the drive home, and then as he gets to my house, he proceeds to apologize profusely about it. I heard later from my friend Mark that he said I was a tease. When I told my friend about what happened, he stopped talking to Mike, said that he had heard that he could be kind of a sex maniac. How about a borderline psycho? So guy I went on a creepy first date with, let's never ever meet again. I really want to see other people's reaction to this interaction I had with this guy on Bumble. I'm a 30-year-old female, and I matched with this guy, 41 male, and we started talking via text and phone for about 2 weeks before meeting. We had gotten along really well based on texting and phone calls. Finally, we went on an in-person date. We went to a brewery by his house. It was great at first, and the conversation came easily. Then he invited me back to his place to watch a movie, as it was fairly close. One thing of note, I told him previously that I did not want to have sex on the first date, just to avoid the expectation, so I expected to literally watch a movie. When we got to his place, he was immediately touchy and affectionate. I gave him a kiss and we made out for a few seconds before he told me to go into his room. I really regret not speaking up for myself and saying no. It was just an awkward situation for me, so I just went. This is where it gets super weird. During the sex, he was so cringe, saying things like, "Who's my princess?" and "Whose pussy is this?" Like, not yours, dude. I don't know you. He then was saying it was so good that he wasn't going to let me leave. He said it multiple times. He then proceeded to say that he was keeping my underwear. I said no, and he insisted that he was, and there's nothing I could do about it. I literally just wanted to fucking leave. I felt so weird and unsafe, and just gross. I told him I was taking my underwear back, and I did. He remained naked for a while, and I got dressed. I told him I needed to go. He got dressed and I left. Does anyone else think that he was absolutely weird and creepy? I have ASD. This means that sometimes I really miss important social cues. Please help me decipher this person's motives. Several years ago on a first date, my date took out a firearm, pointed it at my head, and said, "Be careful who you get in cars with." I had no idea what to do. Scream? Run? Stay still? I couldn't believe I missed that he could be an assailant. Worst of all, I zeroed in on the weapon, calmly grabbed the barrel, and monotonely said, "I'm gonna take this now," and I slowly slid it out of his hand. Thankfully, I didn't get hurt. After I put it away, I got out of the car and left. He rolled down his window, pointed his finger at me in the shape of a weapon, and yelled, "Pow pow," manically laughed, and drove off. Do you think he was planning on this and was too surprised by my reaction to follow through? Or do you think he was generally being a nice guy, trying to teach me a lesson on safety? Perhaps he had a mental issue. What would you have done in this situation? I'd like your perspectives on this. It happened a decade ago and still haunts and perplexes me to this day. Three to 4 years ago, I decided to check out Tinder and see what it's all about, thinking, what the hell, and that I had nothing to lose. I quickly made a profile. After about an hour or so checking out the app and how to use it, I matched with a guy in my area and we started talking. We spent most of that afternoon exchanging messages and chatting, asking questions, and getting to know each other. By late afternoon, he had given me his cell number, and we took the messages away from Tinder and started texting. For a few days after that, everything was normal, and we were having nice chats almost daily. Naively, I thought this was pretty cool, to match with someone so nice that had similar interests on my first go using Tinder. Boy, I was wrong. On the fourth day of us texting back and forth, his tone shifts and he starts asking really odd questions. Some of them sexual, some of them are not. There had been flirting between us and a few double entendres, etc., but nothing like what he was starting to ask. A lot of his questions were really specific sexually. I quickly nipped this in the bud and told him that I was uncomfortable. He apologized for this and accepted how I was feeling. We proceeded from there, albeit a little more cautiously on my part. I didn't have a lot of dating experience at the age of 20, and this was the first time using Tinder or online dating. I thought it was normal behavior. However, I knew not to ignore the odd feeling I had in the pit of my stomach. When he asked me if I would like to meet up for coffee a few days later, I accepted somewhat reluctantly. I knew enough about this sort of stuff to make sure to tell people I was going out, who with, and where I was going, just in case anything happened. After we agreed on a local coffee shop, the tone turned again and he started making all these assumptions. And I had to tell him several times that no, I would not sleep with him straight away. The final straw came when he started texting me saying that we should run away together and that he was going to take me away and we could elope. Just as I'm formulating a text to send back to him in reply to the "I want to whisk you away" message, my phone pings and I get a message from him telling me that he has rope and duct tape in the back of his car, ready for use. I noped out of there real quick. I stopped replying to his messages, blocked him, and reported his profile through Tinder. I wasn't sure what else to do about the situation aside from that, but I made sure that anyone I knew that was using Tinder, that I told them about this guy, and if he came up, they knew not to match with him. So guy with a rope and duct tape in the back of his car who wants to take a girl away. Let's not meet. This goes back to my very first year in college. I was 19. At the time, I had an on and off again girlfriend whom I just had a fight with. Meanwhile, my best friend at the time, a guy called Matt, had been chatting up this girl named Sarah. The thing about Matt was that he was the kind of guy who always had a girlfriend and another lady or two in the works if things didn't work out. The problem was it takes a certain level of instability to be okay with that setup, and that attracts a certain level of instability. Anyway, he was chatting up Sarah, but at the last minute decided to get back together with his ex. In order to save face, he played it off as him testing her to see if she was right for me. He at no point consulted me about this. Instead, he approached me at lunch and said, "Hey, you want to go on a date with Sarah?" I responded in the negative, but was informed that that was less of a question and more of an informative statement. We met up and the date goes okay. She's fairly pretty and very nice. We had ice cream and sat around talking. At the end, we exchanged numbers and go our separate ways. Now, I should clarify this college was a very small, private Christian college. Relationships tended to move quickly, and I was fairly inexperienced. That's why I let things go on as long as they did. She texted me that night and we talked a bit before bed. The next morning, she told me she loved me. I was a bit uncomfortable with this, to say the least. The next day, she made a comment about, "If we got married." I should have left. I should have gotten in my car and driven as far as fuck out of there as possible. I didn't. We met that Sunday and went to church together. She held my hand the entire time, and anytime I so much as glanced in her direction, she got this big, creepy, serial killer grin on her face. There was something about that look and the feeling I got when I saw it. That was when I realized it was time for me to nope on out. I decided that, regardless of how mental she was, I was going to break up with her properly. I took her to a quiet area on campus where a lounge area had been set up, and it made it clear that I was a little concerned about the breakneck pace of this relationship, and I thought that it would be best if we distanced ourselves from one another. She asked me if I was breaking up with her. After a little bit of stalling, I said yes. Thus began 2 months of hell. The next morning, I woke up to a knock on my dorm room door. It was 6 a.m. I opened the door to see her and a couple of her friends. She informed me that they were there to help us talk through our relationship and the issues we were having. I slammed the door in their faces and went back to bed. Not my finest hour, but she was nuts and I was tired. When I woke up, her friends were gone, but she had been sitting outside my door the whole time, not crying, just sitting. She was angry. I walked out into the hallway and she gave me a lecture about how this is not how you should treat your girlfriend. I walked away from her while she was still talking. I was done with this. The next few days, I saw her out of the corner of my eye a few times. Each time, I had a friend confirm that she was actually there. I don't just mean around campus either. That's explainable enough. Other places as well. For example, a friend invited me to his college class at his church. About 5 minutes later, she strolled in. I don't remember the exact wording that the teacher used, but he clearly indicated that she had never attended this class before. That night, I got a text that read, "I saw you make eye contact with me at least twice. I think you want to get back together with me." I spent most of the next few weeks in my room, only leaving for class. My friends would drop off food at my door for meals. She began following them as well. Matt actually told me that Sarah found him playing basketball with some other folks and asked where I was. He told her that he and I were meeting for dinner. She said that she'll join us and sat down on the bench. He reminded her that it was only 2 p.m. and that dinner wasn't at least for 4 hours. "I know," she replied. My grades plummeted. I stopped going to classes for everything short of a test. She knew my schedule. I tried to perhaps dissuade her by getting back together with my on and off again girlfriend. This worked for a time, but Sarah wound up talking to her. They had a chat, and Sarah made some thinly veiled threats that made her uncomfortable, so she broke up with me once more. When the semester ended, I was done. My family lived about 700 miles away. I figured this was more than enough distance to keep her at bay. I blocked her on all forms of social media and changed my number. Adam, another friend of mine, recounted Sarah's actions to me. Apparently, for a time, she dated a guy who had the first name as me. Broadly speaking, he even looked a bit like me. She told him to wear glasses because it made him look distinguishable. The fact that they were the same style as mine was, I'm sure, purely coincidental. During this time, her emotional state was erratic, to say the least. She told people that I touched her without her permission and that I broke up with her in a shitty way. Adam also thinks she turned to self-harm as she wore long sleeves in the summer in the deep south. Eventually, she met a guy who was a bit clingy and desperate and willing to accept her quirks. That's the last I heard about her. This has kind of tainted my view of relationships. I used to be sort of clingy and creepy, but this sent me perhaps a bit too far in the other direction. I'm a bit too detached for a lot of girls now. I also developed a sort of fear of intimacy that I'm slowly getting over. I'm not exaggerating when I say that last year was the first time I hugged a person since the incident in 2010. Edit. I just realized I neglected to mention a key piece of creepiness. She did contact me once I changed my number. I have no idea how she got my new number, and mentioned that she would be willing to come up to see me if I ever wanted to talk. This was shortly before she started dating totally not me.